There is a town in Jalisco, Mexico called Teocaltiche. It has a cathedral, a central plaza, a school, a market on Saturdays, families who have lived there for 5 generations. It also has a CJNG commander who decides who eats, who sleeps, and who disappears. This is not a story about monsters. Monsters are easy. You spot them, you fear them, you run. This is a story about something far more dangerous. A system so deeply embedded in ordinary life that it has become indistinguishable from it. Over 3 episodes, we've traced the rise of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel from a fragmented group of outcasts to the most powerful criminal organization on the planet. We've watched El Mencho build his empire, survive every assault, and finally fall. But El Mencho was never the story. This is the story. What happens to a country, to a people, when the war never ends? In 2006, President Felipe Calderón made a decision that seemed reasonable, even brave. He sent the military into the streets to fight the cartels directly. Full mobilization. A real war. By the time that war officially wound down, over 150,000 Mexicans were dead. Hundreds of thousands more had vanished, not killed in combat, but disappeared. Families who still hold photographs and wait for a knock on the door that never comes. And the cartels? They were stronger, more fragmented, yes. But fragmentation doesn't mean weakness. It means unpredictability. It means 5 smaller wars instead of 1. The CJNG was born from that fragmentation. El Mencho didn't rise despite the war on drugs. He rose because of it. Every military operation that shattered a rival organization left a vacuum, and he filled every single one. This is the iron law of cartel warfare that no government has been able to break. You cannot kill your way to victory when the conditions that produce cartels remain intact. Poverty, impunity, institutional failure. These are not byproducts of the cartel problem. They are its oxygen. 2 decades of military operations. $60 billion in US anti-narcotics assistance. And today, organized crime controls more Mexican territory than at any point in recorded history. At what point do we admit the strategy has failed? To understand why the CJNG cannot simply be dismantled, even with El Mencho gone, you have to understand what it actually sells. Not cocaine, not heroin. Those markets were already saturated, competitive, dangerous to transport. The CJNG made a strategic decision in the mid-2000s that changed everything. Fentanyl. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin. A dose the size of a few grains of salt can kill a grown man. And it can be synthesized from chemicals that are entirely legal in most of the world. The supply chain works like this. Chinese chemical companies, operating legally, at least technically, export precursor chemicals to Mexico. CJNG chemists, some of them trained pharmacologists, convert those precursors into fentanyl powder in labs across Sinaloa and Jalisco. The powder is pressed into pills, often designed to look exactly like prescription medication. And then it moves north. Not in massive shipments that can be intercepted, in thousands of tiny packages, through postal services, hidden in car door panels, inside produce shipments, inside the bodies of couriers. In 2023, fentanyl killed over 74,000 Americans, more than the entire Vietnam War, more than every US combat death since Korea combined. And the CJNG didn't create that demand. America created that demand. Purdue Pharma flooded American towns with OxyContin. Doctors prescribed opioids by the millions. Patients became addicted, and when the prescription market tightened, They needed something else, something cheap, something powerful. The CJNG simply answered the call. This is the part of the story that makes politicians on both sides of the border deeply uncomfortable. The cartel is not operating in spite of the American system. In many ways, it is operating through it. The version of the cartel that appears on the news is men with rifles and armored trucks. That version is real, but it is not the most dangerous version. The most dangerous version wears a suit and sits in a boardroom. Every year, the CJNG generates somewhere between $20 and $30 billion in revenue. That money has to go somewhere. You cannot deposit $30 billion in cash without someone noticing, unless you have an infrastructure of front companies, corrupt financial institutions, and willing intermediaries to help it disappear. U.S. federal court documents have traced CJNG money through real estate firms in California and Texas, through shell companies registered in Delaware and the British Virgin Islands, through luxury car dealerships in Guadalajara, through agriculture businesses, through construction contracts funded by municipal governments that the cartel controls. In 2023, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned a network of over 40 companies across 10 countries, all linked to CJNG money laundering. The individuals running those companies were not gangsters. They were accountants, lawyers, real estate developers, people with clean hands and dirty money. This is why financial sanctions matter in a way that military operations don't. You cannot shoot a bank transfer, but you can make it visible. And visibility is the one thing the CJNG cannot survive. A cartel's power is not just guns and fear. It is anonymity. The moment its money becomes traceable, its whole architecture begins to crack. We have spent a lot of time in this series talking about power, strategy, money, geopolitics. Now we have to talk about something harder. Since 2006, Mexico has registered over 400,000 homicides linked to organized crime. Another 100,000 people are officially listed as disappeared, vanished, without trace, without explanation, without justice. Those are not statistics. Each one is a name, a face, a family that will never have an answer. In Jalisco, the CJNG's home state, the disappeared are so numerous that families have formed their own search collectives. Mothers and wives who spend their weekends with shovels, searching fields and dry riverbeds for the remains of people the government stopped looking for years ago. These women, and it is almost always women, have found thousands of clandestine graves across Mexico. They receive no state protection. Several have been killed for their work. This is not collateral damage. This is the cartel's most deliberate strategy. Make the cost of resistance so unbearable that silence becomes the rational choice. And it works. In dozens of Mexican municipalities, local journalists have stopped reporting on cartel activity entirely, not because they were censored, but because their colleagues who did it are dead. Mexico has more journalist murders per year than any country not officially at war. Let that fact sit with you for a moment. More journalists killed than in Syria, than in Afghanistan, in a country at peace, officially on paper, in the statistics of international bodies. The CJNG did not create this silence, but it depends on it. El Mencho is gone. That is a fact. What that means, nobody fully knows yet. In the months since his death, CJNG factions have clashed in Jalisco, Guanajuato, Michoacán, and Colima. His former lieutenants are testing each other's limits. Some have begun negotiating with rival organizations. Others have escalated violence to assert dominance. The franchise model El Mencho built was designed to outlast him. Local cells operate with significant autonomy. The brand, the green flags, the social media presence, the terror infrastructure persists even when the center is unstable. But here is the critical difference between 2026 and every previous cartel transition. The international pressure has never been higher. The FTO designation allows US prosecutors to charge anyone, anywhere in the world, who provides material support to the CJNG. European financial regulators have implemented their own screening protocols. Asian port authorities, for the first time, are actively flagging CJNG-linked shipping containers. The cartel is not facing an existential threat from within Mexico. It is facing something it has never faced before, a genuinely coordinated international response. Whether that response has teeth, whether it translates into real prosecutions, real asset seizures, real disruption of the fentanyl supply chain, is the open question of the next decade. The CJNG's greatest strength was always its invisibility. It operated in the spaces between jurisdictions, between institutions, between the cracks of the international system. Those cracks are narrowing, not fast enough, not efficiently enough, but narrowing. For the first time in 30 years of cartel warfare, there is a version of this story where the institution loses before the country does. Every serious analyst who has studied Mexico's cartel crisis comes to the same conclusion, eventually, even if they arrive there by different paths. The solution is not military, it is not American, and it is not fast. The solution is the slow, grinding, generation-long work of building institutions that cannot be bought, courts that function, police forces that are paid, protected, and held accountable, prosecutors who are not afraid, a civil service that is a career, not a corrupt windfall. Colombia offers a partial model, not a perfect one, not a clean one, but a real one. In the 1990s, Colombia was considered a failed state. Medellin was the most violent city on earth. Today, it has urban renewal programs that other cities study. It still has cartels, but it has a state that is genuinely fighting back and winning ground inch by inch. Mexico has the capacity for that transformation. It has universities, civil society organizations, investigative journalists who risk their lives every day, anti-corruption prosecutors who keep working despite death threats. The raw material of a functioning democracy exists. What it lacks is time and political will, and a population that has been ground down by decades of failure to the point where hope itself feels like a luxury. And here is where the United States must be honest about its own role. American demand drives the fentanyl market. American gun stores supply the cartel's arsenals. A 2024 ATF report found that over 70% of weapons seized from cartels in Mexico were legally purchased in the United States. American banks have repeatedly been caught processing cartel proceeds, receiving fines so small they are effectively operating costs. The United States cannot point south and call this Mexico's problem. It is a North American problem, and it will require a North American solution. One that treats addiction as a public health crisis, stops the weapons flow, and makes money laundering genuinely costly for the financial institutions that enable it. There is a boy in Jalisco, I will not tell you his name or his town, who is 11 years old. His father was killed by the cartel when he was 4. His older brother was recruited at 15 and has not been seen since. He goes to school. He plays football on a dirt pitch near the highway. He has a teacher who is trying. He also lives 3 blocks from a cartel safe house, in a neighborhood where everyone knows what happens to people who talk. He is not a statistic. He is not a symbol. He is a child living a life that he did not choose, in a war that was handed to him before he was born. The CJNG will not be remembered as an organization that was too powerful to defeat. It will be remembered as proof of what happens when society decides that some people's lives are an acceptable price for everyone else's comfort. El Mencho built his empire out of that indifference, and unless something fundamental changes, in Mexico, in Washington, in the boardrooms that launder the money and the laboratories that synthesize the poison, the next El Mencho is already out there, learning, watching, waiting for the next crack in the wall. This has been The Last Cartel. Thank you for watching all of it.